Next up, we got Kathy Malone. She's going to be sharing us all about her journey of going tiny and specifically her journey of kind of refurbishing a caretaker cottage and then just what she's got going on. She's been living tiny for over 30 years. So, very cool. Kathy, I see that you are on here. Can you?
How's the
Uh,
sound? Can you hear me?
yep, we can hear you. So I'm guessing you're gonna share your screen here and then no video. Is that all right?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in the rural digital divide, so I have 1.5 meg of bandwidth. So if I do a video, you will lose me.
No
So
worries.
welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me. And I'm going to try and get through everything in 15 minutes so we've got time for questions. So this is going to go fast. I'm going to tell you stories about the cottage, but I'm an environmental engineer, so I can answer. I've done that for 40 years around hazardous materials and manufacturing, so I can answer questions about hazardous chemicals. I've also been deeply into the whole green energy transition and sustainability lately. And I have had a horse farm for 33 years, which is what this is. So you're seeing my cottage, which is 625 square feet, and I live in half of it, actually. I live in the west half. So it was a caretaker cottage that nobody ever loved. It had single pane glass that didn't close when it didn't open when I got it. So this is a view of the property. This is a view of the view from my porch. And it's taking, Zach, let me know if they're able to see the photos. It's going to take me a minute to swap between one and the other.
Okay, yep. It's kind of bouncing in and out. Looks like as you're swapping. So
Okay, this is looking in a different direction. So this is the barn. I'm on actually 80 acres. And what's interesting about this for tiny home people, is I am zoned agricultural, and zoned agricultural, as I checked out before I got the place, means that I can have migrant worker housing. And migrant worker housing is defined in my township as either, essentially awful ground built housing or RVs. So it's legal for me to have an RV on the property that is a worker at the farm. And what this is might be interesting for you guys, is a lot of horse farms would probably like to have somebody on site 24/7, 365, like living there, who's a backup for them. So if you're anywhere where you can get near to agricultural or horse farms, that is a possibility for you to go look for a place to park your tiny house. Another view, so this is looking north from the property. So when I moved in, like I say, the caretaker's cottage had not been cared for. I found a contractor who gutted it and rebuilt things. For the windows were $4,000, and that was double pane, which was state of the art at the time. And we did a very minimal refurb. So we just sanded the floorboards that were already there, polyurethaned them, redid the formica in the kitchen, put down vinyl flooring, and $8,000 later, I was moved in. When I moved in, there was also a mobile home that had been built in the 60s, and I don't think the carpet had been cleaned since. And I actually pulled the carpet, stain killed the floor, and lived there while they redid the cottage. And my stall cleaning person, it was going to cost me $8,000 to tear the mobile home and get rid of it. And my stall cleaning person had her son come back from the military. They hauled it off, refixed it up, and a couple of years later wanted the title because they were able to sell it, which I thought was wonderful. So I'm going to share another picture. This is the east view. So environmentally, if you're actually going to be getting your own property, or even if you're siting it, you want to search for environmentally contaminated sites, was the terms I used for the state of Michigan. And you don't want to just be searching for Superfund sites, because that will be a much narrower filter. You also, Google Earth didn't exist when I bought this place. But I would also search Google Earth, although that's not going to show you a landfill that's been covered over. It's going to just look like grass. So you're looking for anything industrial within a couple miles to see if your groundwater is contaminated. You're also going to want to test your own water, because your county water test department is only going to check for coliform bacteria and nitrates. Costs about $685. There's some test kits you can do this yourself that look pretty good to me. One of the things I like about movable tiny houses, I haven't had a chance to implement yet, but movable tiny houses as a social justice play, they decouple wealth building from land ownership. So I live halfway between Flint and Ann Arbor, which I describe as between the sublime and the decimated. And Michigan State University has a program called domicology, which is and they said Dr. Rex Lamore, who started it, said he wanted it to sound like a disease. It's the study of urban blight, how to remediate it, and how to prevent it. The how to prevent it is not in our wheelhouse, but the how to remediate it. Imagine if we disassembled the Flint houses, turned those into movable tiny houses, and made those available to the residents. I have visions of a build one, get one, where if you build two of them, you can, one of them goes to you to live in, and the other one goes to somebody else to live in. And the thing that's interesting with respect to that is, find the right picture. Okay, so here you see the barns on the right, and in front of the barns, there's the deck that used to be the entrance to the mobile home, and you see a bunch of boards leaning against it. And those are the old oak fence boards from the farm. As they come down, I dry them out and then I put them in the barn, and those are 2x6 oak, which is too heavy for movable tiny houses unless you build, remember I'm an engineer, removable panels. Also, being a horse person, I'm looking at how could a person repurpose a horse trailer as a movable tiny house. They're a little low. Like my horse trailer's 8 foot 6 inches inside the ceiling height. But I think as a gooseneck, you might be able to open that up and have like a retracting skylight, if you will, that would open up and raise up like a pop-up camper. So think about this reusing other materials. For sustainability, one of the things that we need that we don't have unless someone tells me is really good lightweight insulation that is not isocyanate. That's not, I'm looking for a good plant-based foam insulation, although the other one that occurred to me is Alternative Technology Collaborative is a nonprofit who does work in Guatemala and Detroit, and they do solar panel. They actually demonstrated that pet food bags are better insulation than the pink stuff, the fiberglass insulation, which was pretty interesting to me. And since I operate at the speed of cash and I haven't found an insulation I want to use on the cottage, I stuffed feed bags with feed bags and put those against the wall in the winter to help insulate my cottage, which is 1/2-inch press board insulation. So it's pretty grim. I use mini splits, electric mini splits, only in the areas that I live in to help supplement my propane heat. But one of the other things that I want to explore before next winter is, could we do air-filled panels? Like, think of an air mattress, but solid, that you could put against the walls, and what would the R factor on that be? And those would certainly be lightweight enough you could just deflate them if you wanted to move your tiny house, and the weight, almost no weight. I would love to hear if anybody has used source water or is familiar with source water. It's panels that pull water out of the air. It doesn't work in Michigan in the winter, but it works most other places. Will help get you clean, environmentally sustainable, get you unpolluted water, presumably. I would still test it, but it certainly would be a lot closer. So I have used up a few of my minutes, and you have a sense of the different kind of breadth of topics I can talk about. I'm going to throw it open to the floor for questions. If you've got questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand and Zach will answer them. We'll read them out to me.
Yeah. Hey, Kathy. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that and whatnot. We'd love to hear I'd love to hear specifically about what the most complicated aspect of kind of refurbishing your cottage house was.
The most complicated aspect of it. Finding someone to do it, probably. I don't even, and for that, what I would point you to is local, if you're anywhere where you can get to a rural area, go to a local feed store like mine where they grow their own grain and ask them who they would recommend and who they use. Because those people, a personal recommendation from a farmer is going to be somebody who's going to be practical for you and cost effective, probably. Farmers don't have any extra money to be spending on fancy stuff. I would also descale, scale back down, do the absolute minimum, because you will discover, at least 95%, I'm pretty sure, that what you thought you needed isn't exactly what you need. So if you do the absolute minimum, you can reconfigure, change your vision as you live in the place and get a sense of how it works for you, instead of having spent a whole lot of money and then it's hard to and invested a lot of stuff and it's hard to retool. This is a picture of what my 2x6 oak fence boards look like. You see the rough side, which is what some people like, but you see how it planes up. It's absolutely gorgeous wood, which I would never have guessed before I planed it out. Got another question for me, Zach?
Yeah, for sure. And that wood does look beautiful. So let's see here. How much of the floor plan did you have to change when you're kind of remodeling the cottage house?
0. And that was part of keeping it inexpensive. We left the walls where they were. It's an open great room on the east side of the cottage with fake styrofoam timbers, which are awful, and in dark brown, that are, 2 of them have fallen down now. I have to figure out what I'm going to do with it. It had a loft that I had visions of turning into a sleeping loft with horrible brown shag carpet in it, and a little tiny window. And when I had visions of turning that into a sleeping loft, and it was way too claustrophobic and hot. And instead, I wound up building a raised bed from old barnwood, imagine that, so that when I wake up, I can look out the windows. Here you see the east side, you see a catio that we built. Is that angled thing at the far back of the picture? Those are 2 of my feral cats. I've got 6 total. And you see the cheap insulation from Habitat Restore. I think those panels were $1.50 each. And the door itself was $5, which is a makeshift insulation, half disassembled because it's almost spring, for the little porch that you see, the little shed there. The shed there, last winter when it was 5 below, my water froze. So inside that shed is an oil-filled heater set to low, just enough to keep the water from freezing. And the plan is to rebuild that at some point in time into a nicely insulated, possibly a sun porch. I highly recommend Habitat Restore, and you just kind of go back and go back and go back, and you'll get ideas wandering through their aisles. It's a wonderful place, or whatever restore store you have near you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, yeah, so you're basically trying to figure out how to keep your water pipes from freezing and doing a temporary setup for that now. I see. And yeah, I agree. Trying to find a restore like that where you can find materials really cheap. Obviously, it can add a little bit extra time in the labor and whatnot, but if you're looking for a very inexpensive home or doing it as cheap as possible, it's definitely the way to go for sure.
So for example, the catio, that angled board you see at the back, that has chicken wire across the front so the cats can't get out. And I noticed at Habitat Restore, they have some actual screen doors that are plastic around the sides. It's plastic framing, so it wouldn't require a lot of maintenance. And those are $15. So one of those could replace that chicken wire. On the other hand, cats tend to tear up screens, and chicken wire, not so much.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So you got 6 cats, and how many horses do you have?
I'm down to 3. I had a high of 24, and I was at 18 for most of my 33 years here. They aged out, so I have kitties. I have horses buried in various places around the property. I'm actually zoned for a cemetery. I can have up to a 1-acre cemetery on the place, which I found pretty interesting when I was reading the zoning rules.
Yeah, okay.
And
It's very cool. Very cool. And were those all your horses, or were you renting them out or renting out the stalls?
they actually were all my horses, and I abandoned stalls the second winter I was there. We called it the siege winter. It was the winter that it went to 10 below actual air temperature and 60 below wind chills for like 10 days straight in January. And in November, at that point in time, I had 24 horses, and they all came in at night and they all went out during the day. And I had 2 people working full-time 365 days a year. And they rolled their pickup truck driving drunk November 17th. When you remember the date on a horse farm, it's not a good thing, but they were okay, but they didn't come back. And guess what? Nobody answers ads for stall cleaners when it's 10 below. So my old timer mentor, who had forgotten more than I'll ever know, said, "You're not going to make it unless we turn them out." By then I had put in no climb fencing, keep safe diamond mesh fencing all the way around the property, and divided it off into fields, and I'd put in the run-in. So we turned the horses out, and we grained them 2 fence posts apart, morning and night, and that was the last grain they ever got, because I've got enough property that my horses can live on grass from right about now until November, and then they live on round bale hay from November to now, and they're healthier, they're happier, and we went from 2 people full-time, 1 person can do it in 15 minutes a day. And round bale, by going from square bales to round bales, we went from an hour twice a day for labor to about 1 hour twice a week that can be scheduled around the weather. So I was able to actually reduce the cost of running the horse farm by 90% with turning the horses out and other, if you're familiar with lean, other continuous improvements that I made to the place. So my stalls, I occasionally use them for clinics when I would have clinics. I haven't done those in a while. But a stall for a horse is kind of like you living in the front seat of your car in terms of the relative proportions, in terms of the size. And oh, by the way, it's your bathroom also, but we clean it up once a day probably. So horses were not meant to live in stalls. They get all the vices, all the mental problems that people living in that people confined to solitary confinement have. And it was just it was out of a very bad thing. Seemed at the time, turned out to be probably one of the best things that happened to the farm.
Wow, that's really crazy. And so you lived in your tiny house during that freeze storm, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's always got to be a good initiation into living into your tiny home like that. So
The first winter in any is always just an amazing challenge. The first cold spell of every year, you find out everything you did not get ready for winter. And if you're lucky, like this year, we went down to 6 degrees, but then it bounced back up again to 40, so you could fix the things that you'd missed before winter set in for real, which it really didn't this year. We didn't have much winter this year.
yeah, okay. Well, that's kind of nice. Good.
So the
Well,
picture of the horse, that's Junior. He lives loose on the front lawn, so he just gets the run of the property. His buddy aged out about 2 years ago. So if you drive into my property, it's a reason I have a gate closed at the end of the driveway, because I have a horse that gets to just wander loose. the other two, how did we wind up with horses that can't eat grass? They're insulin resistant, so they have to be in a little tiny lot and eat hay instead of grass.
That always makes things interesting, doesn't it?
It
Good,
certainly
good.
does.
Yeah, well, that's super cool. So you've been living tiny for a long time now, and you feel like you have plenty of storage inside of your tiny home?
No, I have 80 acres and 30 stalls, and storage would be the most challenging part if I had to really move into a tiny house and not have storage. You know,
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
continually trying to because I also had 2 estates and a 2,000 square foot office move into my horse farm. So it kind of filled up all the loose spots. And I haven't gotten around to clearing all that stuff out because I do some entrepreneurial stuff when I get a spare minute more so than decluttering. Storage is a challenge. I don't know how all of you who
Okay,
only
yeah.
have your tiny house manage storage. And I guess also, so I don't have a stove when I move, because it's just me. And when I moved into the cottage, one of the things was there was a stove in the corner when you first walked in, and I don't think it had been cleaned in the 30 years the place had been a horse farm. So we hauled that out to the road and let the trash
God,
people take
did I
it.
just-
And I have a microwave. Yeah.
You guys are fucking assholes. What the fuck? Oh my.
Whoops. I don't know who to mute, Matt. Zach.
Yeah, sorry, that was somebody else. I just muted them. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, so I have a toaster oven, a coffee pot, and a microwave. So I'm technically electric from that standpoint. The only things that are propane in the house are the heater and the hot water heater. Eventually, I'm looking at other options for that. But I don't cook. If you can't make it in a microwave or a toaster oven, then I go out for it.
Okay, yeah,
Which
that
I
makes sense.
recognize is not most people. So my part-time job is I work at Zingerman's Delicatessen, which I joke is my exercise program. They pay me to do and they feed me besides. And it is our 42nd birthday today.
Hey, well, look at that. Happy birthday, Zingermans. That's pretty fun.
So it went from a deli that everybody said would fail 42 years ago, wrong section of town, one-way streets, no parking, to 11 food-related businesses, 65 million in gross rev, 700 employees, all local to Ann Arbor. And there's a fabulous book about it called by Mickey Maynard, Satisfaction Guaranteed. It's a terrific way to run a company if you've got any interest in that kind of thing. And it's very different than most companies run.
Yeah, that's pretty cool to see it all kind of come together like that. And like you said, people thought it was going to fail, and yet it didn't. So very cool, very cool. Well, yeah, let's see. So for somebody who's looking to go tiny, what would be your biggest piece of advice for them?
Go at the speed of cash, go cheap. If you're not in debt and if you have to pay for it as you go, you will find different options. And so, for example, if you get I have to research the weight that horse trailers can carry. But I also know that if I got a frame that wasn't as sturdy as the expensive ones you can buy new, then maybe I would be more mindful about using lightweight building materials. And someone may have an answer to this. I don't know, you probably do, Zach. It occurred to me that it actually might be less wear and tear on the tiny house and not that much more expensive to actually load it on a flatbed, like one of those big trailers that carry heavy equipment, and haul the actual tiny house instead of towing it behind a vehicle and having the wear and tear of the road bouncing. So if you build your first tiny house on a shoestring and you pay for it as you go, then you can probably sell that one and upgrade to something that's a little bit fancier when you're ready. You will also, so my vision with this horse farm, I thought I would be there for 5 years and then would sell it and move on to someplace new and fancy. And all the things I found out about this farm, because it had been 5 or 6 different owners before me. and you could see where each had built something on and changed something. And the first ones, the way they built it and the way they sited it, I would never have been that smart and would have learned the hard way by having things not work. So if you build it on a shoestring, you can always then sell that one and upgrade to the next one, and you will learn a ton in the process, and you'll probably be more sustainable because you'll be reusing materials that already exist instead of buying new ones.
Yep, for sure, for sure. No, that's good news. I would say that if you are going to keep it on your trailer, though, that having a really high quality trailer is one of the things that you literally just can't change on a tiny house if it's going to stay on the wheel. So definitely don't want to, at least in my opinion, my humble opinion, cheap out on the trailer specifically if you're keeping it on the trailer. But kind of to your point, if you're just going to end up putting it on, piers or on some sort of foundation in place, definitely makes a lot of sense to just, not worry about the trailer as much if it's just moving once or twice or whatever like that. But if you are keeping it on the trailer, I mean, you can pretty much remodel almost every other aspect of the trailer, but you can't really take it off and reinstall it like that. Just it doesn't really happen. So going with a nice trailer definitely makes sense.
Yeah, if you're gonna haul it across the road, then absolutely you need a frame that's capable of that. If it's going to sit on somebody's flatbed when it moves down the road, then the wear and tear on it is different. So yeah, absolutely. If you plan to literally tow it where it's going to be bouncing down the road, then the frame is absolutely a non-negotiable. But you might be able to, and also especially if you're building it and it's never going to move. So the one I build that's going to be a guest cottage at the farm, it's never going to move. So the frame is negotiable, and I can learn doing that. And then if you're going to move it down the road, you need, like you say, the frame is absolutely essential.
Yep, absolutely. No, that makes sense to me. Good stuff. Well, thank you so much, Kathy. We're at time right now, but really appreciate you sharing your story. And it's super cool to see how you're able to make it happen by taking an existing structure and basically doing a full remodel on it to where it was livable for what you were looking for to achieve. And super cool to hear your story. And thank you for sharing it all.
Zach, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, and we'll talk to you later.